Good day everyone, this is Lyra Aguilar, and in this video, I will be going to discuss about Chapter 34, Lesson 1 and Lesson 2, which is all about the colonies become new nations. This chapter has the main ideas such as revolution, power and authority, and economics. So, let's have first Lesson 1. The Indian subcontinent achieves freedom. After World War II, dramatic political changes began to take place across the world. So this was especially the case with regard to the policy of colonialism. Countries that held colonies began to question the practice. After the world struggle against dictatorship, many leaders argued that no country should control another nation. So others questioned the high cost and commitment of holding colonies. So meanwhile, the people of colonized regions continued to press even harder for their freedom. All of this led to independence for one of the largest and most populous colonies in the world, which is the British-held India. So, this lesson discusses how the Indian subcontinent gained independence after World War II. After the war, many countries started questioning colonialism because it was expensive and went against the idea of freedom they had just fought for. So at the same time, people living in colonies demanded independence more strongly, because one of the most important results of this global change was the independence of India, which was one of the largest and most populated under British rule. Now that we understand the global changes after World War II and why colonialism began to collapse, let us look at how the movement for independence in India actually began. So, let us all have a movement toward independence. So, Britain ruled India for almost 200 years, and resistance had already existed long before World War II. However, Indian anger intensified in 1934 when Britain involved India in the war without consulting Indian leaders. So this made many Indians feel disrespected and powerless. Because of this, nationalist movements became stronger and the demand for independence became more urgent. So as resistance against British rule grew stronger, leadership and political divisions within India became more visible, and especially through influential figures and political parties. So now, let's know about the role of Gandhi and political parties. Mohandas Gandhi became the most important leader of the independence movement. He encouraged non-violent resistance and non-cooperation with British authorities, such as refusing to follow unfair laws. Many leaders were imprisoned, but the movement continued. At the same time, political tensions grew between two major groups, such as the Congress Party, which was mostly Hindu, and the Muslim League led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Muslims feared that an independent India would be controlled mainly by Hindus. So, while Indian leaders pushed harder for freedom, the growing religious and political divisions made the path to independence more complicated and tense. After World War II, Britain was economically weak and could no longer afford to control India. So the British were now ready to give independence. But a serious problem remained. Who would rule India? Hindus and Muslims could not agree on sharing power. So this agreement caused widespread violence and made independence very difficult and chaotic. Because of the increasing violence and disagreements over power, Britain decided on a solution that would permanently change the future of the Indian subcontinent. So, to prevent further conflict, Britain decided to divide India into two nations, India for Hindus and Pakistan for Muslims. So this division was called partition. Millions of people were forced to migrate to the country that matched their religion. Sadly, this led to extreme violence. Around 10 million people were displaced and about 1 million died. Even Gandhi was heartbroken by the violence, and in 1948 he was assassinated by a Hindu extremist. However, even after partition was implemented, independence did not bring immediate peace, as new conflicts quickly emerged between the two nations. And this is the battle for Kashmir. Partition did not end conflict between India and Pakistan. One of the most serious disputes involved Kashmir, a region located between the two countries. Although Kashmir's ruler was Hindu, most of its population was Muslim. Both India and Pakistan claimed the territory, leading to war shortly after independence. So in 1949, the United Nations arranged a ceasefire that divided Kashmir between the two nations. However, the conflict over Kashmir continues today and remains a major source of tension. But despite these conflicts, India moved forward as an independent nation and began building its own government and democratic system. So this is now the modern India. So India officially gained independence on August 15, 1947 and became the world's largest democracy. As independence approached, Jawaharlal Nehru addressed the nation and emphasized unity and hope for the future. Despite the violence and challenges left by partition, India committed itself to democratic rule and self-governance. And now, to understand how India developed after independence, it is important to look at the leadership that guided the country during its early years. So this is the man who leads India, which is Jawaharlal Nehru. So Nehru served as India's first prime minister for 17 years. He was a close follower of Gandhi and was educated in Britain. So Jawaharlal Nehru emphasized democracy, national unity, and economic modernization. He promoted industrial development and social reforms, especially improving the status of women and lower castes, right? Because India has its caste system. So internationally, Nehru helped from the non-aligned movement, allowing India to remain neutral during the Cold War. Although Nehru laid a strong foundation for India, later leaders faced serious challenges that tested the stability of the nation. So this is it now. After Nehru's death in 1964, political unity weakened. His daughter Indira Gandhi became prime minister and ruled during a difficult period. So she faced threats from Sikh extremists who wanted an independent Sikh state. In 1984, the Indian army attacked the Sikh Golden Temple, killing hundreds. But in retaliation, Indira Gandhi was also assassinated by her Sikh bodyguards. This led to violent attacks against Sikhs. Later, her son Rajiv Gandhi became also a prime minister, destabilizing the country. So these internal struggles eventually shaped the modern challenges that India continues to face in the 21st century. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, India faced many challenges including rapid population growth, social inequality, and religious tensions. So India also developed nuclear weapons, testing them in 1998. Pakistan soon followed. Since both countries are nuclear powers and continue to fight over Kashmir, the situation has become a serious international concern. Despite these issues, India remains a vibrant but often unstable democracy. So while India was dealing with its own difficulties, the neighboring country of Pakistan was also struggling to adjust to independence. So let us have Pakistan copes with freedom. So Pakistan's experience after independence was also difficult because the nation was divided into East Pakistan and West Pakistan, separated by more than 1,000 miles of Indian territory. So these two regions differed in culture, language, history, and economy. The only major factor uniting them was Islam, their religion, which made national unity difficult from the beginning. The deep divisions within Pakistan eventually led to one of the most significant events in its history, so which is the creation of Bangladesh. And now, let's have the civil war and the creation of Bangladesh. How Bangladesh was created. So, East Pakistan had a larger population but was often ignored by the government in West Pakistan. So, in 1970, a massive cyclone killed hundreds of thousands of people in East Pakistan, but the government's slow response caused outrage. So in 1971, also East Pakistan declared independence as Bangladesh. A civil war followed and India supported Bangladesh. More than 1 million people died and Pakistan lost a large portion of its territory and population. But even after losing East Pakistan, political instability continued to affect Pakistan's government and leadership. Now, a pattern of instability in Pakistan after independence, Pakistan lacked strong leadership. Its founder, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, also died shortly after independence. So, the country experienced repeatedly military coups beginning in 1958, and leaders such as Ali Bhutto were removed from power, and thus military rule became common. So this constant instability prevented Pakistan from establishing a strong democratic system. And at the same time, the newly formed nation of Bangladesh faced serious problems as it worked to rebuild and govern itself. So, because after independence, Bangladesh faced severe economic problems due to war damage and weak infrastructure, political instability and corruption also slowed progress. And thus, the country also suffered from frequent natural disasters such as cyclones and floods, which destroyed crops and homes. So, as a result, with rapid population growth and poverty also, Bangladesh became one of the poorest nations in the world, although recent years have shown some political improvement. So, lastly, another newly independent nation in the Indian subcontinent is Sri Lanka that also experienced long-lasting struggles after gaining freedom. Sri Lanka gained independence from Britain in 1948, but ethnic tensions soon followed. The majority Sinhalese population and the Tamil minority clashed over political power and cultural rights because Tamil militant groups fought for a separate state, leading to a long civil war beginning in the 1980s. So, efforts to bring peace, including Indian involvement, failed and violence continued for many years. And that ends with Chapter 34, Lesson 1, The Indian Subcontinent Achieves Freedom. So, at this point, we'll be going to discuss about Chapter 34, Lesson 2, which is all about Southeast Asian nations gain independence. Okay, now, World War II had a major impact on Southeast Asia. During the war, Japan took control of many Southeast Asian colonies from European powers. This occupation showed the people of Southeast Asia that European nations were not as powerful as they once seemed. Okay, when Japan was defeated and forced out after the war, Southeast Asians refused to return to European rule. So this was inspired by nationalist movements and weakened colonial powers. Many countries in the region demanded and achieved independence, leading to the creation of several new nations. And now, one of the first Southeast Asian countries to gain independence after the World War II was our country, the Philippines. So Philippines became the first colony in the world to gain independence after World War II. The United States granted Philippine independence in 1946, symbolically on July 4, the same date as America's own Independence Day. After independence, Filipinos focused on rebuilding their economy and restoring Manila, which is the capital of the Philippines, which had been badly damaged during the war. However, independence did not mean complete freedom from foreign influence, especially from the United States, because the United States promised the Philippines $620 million in war damages but required the approval of the Bell Act. So this act allowed free trade between the two countries for 8 years, which worried Filipinos who feared American businesses would exploit their resources. So, despite these concerns, the Bell Act was approved. So the United States also demanded long-term leases on military bases such as Clark Air Base and Subic Bay Naval Base, which later played key roles in the Korean and Vietnam Wars. And as a result, these military and economic ties eventually became a source of tension between the two nations. So, let us have the conflict over US military bases. Okay, so many Filipinos saw the continued presence of United States military bases as a sign of American imperialism. So over time, agreements shortened the lease period, and in 1992, the United States finally gave up its military bases. But meanwhile, the Philippines worked to reduce its dependence on the United States by welcoming Japanese investments and strengthening relations with Southeast Asian neighbors and non-aligned nations. Thus, political leadership within the Philippines also played a major role in shaping the nation after independence. And one of that political leader is Marcos. So now, let's have from Marcos to Aquino. Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Sr. became president in 1965 and ruled as an authoritarian leader for 2 decades, or as a dictator. He imposed martial law that violated human rights and stole millions from public funds. So after the assassination of his opponent, which is Benigno Aquino Sr., public anger increased. And so in 1986, Aquino's widow Corazon Aquino won the election. However, Ferdinand Marcos refused to step down because and so massive public protest forced him to exile, ending his rule. And after the fall of Marcos, the Philippines attempted to strengthen democracy and prevent future abuse of power. So here it is now, the democratic reforms and ongoing challenges. Under President Corazon Aquino, a new democratic constitution was ratified and the United States military bases were removed. Fidel Ramos later became president also and was limited to a single term to prevent dictatorship. So they once learned a lesson from Ferdinand Marcos' ruling in the Philippines. So, despite these reforms, the Philippines continued to face internal conflicts, especially in the southern regions. And one of the most internal challenges involved separatist movements in the southern Philippines. So, let's move on to the government battles rebels. Muslim groups known as the Moros had long lived in the southern Philippines. So in the 1970s, the Moro National Liberation Front fought for independence. Although a peace agreement in 1996 granted them autonomy, extremist groups like Abu Sayyaf continued violent activities, including kidnappings and bombings. So the Philippine government responded with military force supported by US assistance. So while the Philippines struggled with independence, Britain was also granting freedom to its Southern Asian colonies. Okay, so let's have the British colonies gain independence, Burma. So Burma gained independence from Britain in 1948 and later changed its name to Myanmar. However, independence did not bring stability because the country experienced conflict between military rulers, ethnic minorities, and pro-democracy groups. So in 1962, General Ne Win established a military government and attempted to create a socialist state, leading to decades of repression. One of the most important figures in Burma's struggle for democracy emerged during this period. So, now we will be discussing the Aung San Suu Kyi and Burma's struggle for democracy. So Aung San Suu Kyi, daughter of nationalist leader Aung San, became a symbol of democracy in Burma. So she led the National League for Democracy, which won a landslide election victory in 1990. But however, the military government ignored the results and repeatedly placed her under house arrest. Her struggle highlighted Burma's ongoing fight between democracy and military rule. So, other former British colonies such as Malaya and Singapore followed a different path after independence. So, let's have the Malaysia and Singapore. So, after World War II, Britain tried to unite the diverse people of the Malay Peninsula. So, in 1957, the Federation of Malaya was formed. Due to ethnic tensions, Singapore separated in 1965 and became an independent city-state. The remaining federation became Malaysia, which achieved steady economic growth through cooperation among ethnic groups. So Singapore in particular became one of Southeast Asia's greatest economic success stories. So let's move on to Singapore's economic success. Okay, under Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, Singapore developed into a major banking and trade center. It achieved one of the highest standards of living in Southeast Asia and became one of the strongest economies in the world. Singapore's success showed how effective leadership could transform a small nation. Meanwhile, another Southeast Asian nation fought a violent struggle for independence from European rule. And this is Indonesia. So let's have Indonesia gains independence from the Dutch. Indonesia was ruled by the Dutch until Japan destroyed Dutch control during World War II. So after Japan's defeat, Indonesian nationalists led by Sukarno declared independence in 1945. So the Dutch tried to regain control but eventually granted independence in 1949 after losing international support. However, independence did not guarantee stability for Indonesia. So, let's move on to Sukarno and political instability. Indonesia faced serious challenges due to its large population, ethnic diversity, and economic problems. Sukarno struggled to manage the economy, leading to inflation and instability. Thus, in 1965, General Suharto seized power, leading to mass killings and the establishment of a repressive government. Indonesia's troubles continued even under Suharto's long rule. So now, let's know about Suharto's rule and economic crisis. So Suharto ruled Indonesia as a dictator, limiting freedoms and allowing corruption to flourish. Although the economy improved for a time, a major financial crisis in the late 1990s led to widespread unrest, and Suharto was forced to resign in 1998 and Indonesia slowly moved toward democracy. So, Indonesia also lost control of one of its territories during this period. Even though it slowly moved toward democracy, it also lost control of one of its territories during that period. So, let's move on to East Timor wins independence. So, East Timor had been ruled brutally by Indonesia since the 1970s. In a UN-sponsored referendum in 1999, the people voted for independence. Violence followed, but international forces restored peace. So East Timor officially became independent in 2002, with Jose Ramos Horta later elected president. Overall, Southeast Asia's transition from colonial rule was marked by both progress and conflict. So today, Southeast Asia reflects a mixture of past and present. Traditional ways of life exist alongside modern cities and industries. While many nations have made progress, challenges such as poverty, inequality, and political instability remain. Still, democratic reforms are becoming more common across the region. So, that would be all for our chapter 34, which is lesson 1 and lesson 2. So, thank you so much for listening and watching my presentation. And my group mates will be continuing or will continue to report the remaining lessons from chapter 34. Thank you so much.